So let's learn how to sort an array list of objects. In order to sort an array list of objects, we're going to need to use what they call a collections class. The collections class has methods that work with any type of object as long as it's of type collection. In this sample, we're going to say that we want to use a specific sort method to work with the collection of student objects stored in an array list that we're going to call AL student. What we're going to do is pass the sort method the way that we want to sort the data by using a new comparator object working with that student class. Then we're going to go ahead and embed that method within our comparator object that we're going to use to sort. And that method is called compare, and it's used to sort, and it receives two student objects at a time. This method is going to automatically process the entire list of objects in the array list. This method is also going to go ahead and check and see if the first student object's age is less than the other student's object age, and if so, it's going to automatically switch those values. And there's a return value that you're going to notice on that method of type int. And we'll see how that works also. So let's go ahead and create a brand new project. I'll click on next, and let's call it sorting array list of objects. And I'm going to go ahead and leave my create main class checked, and I'm going to click finish. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a class, and I've already created that code, and I'm just going to paste it in here, and then I'll explain it. We're embedding another class in this file. It says class student. Notice that our main class is still a public scope. Make sure you don't put a public class for student, otherwise Java is going to give you an error because you can only have one public class per file. So we'll say class student, and then we're going to give it two attributes. The first one is of type name, it's a public and a string. The other is named age, and it's a public int. And then I went ahead and created a constructor that receives two parameters, a name and an age. And then I'm going to take those parameters and I assign them to the attribute for the student object. So there's our class. Now what we want to be able to do is we're going to write the program that actually allows us to create those objects in an array list of students and load up the data. So since I'm going to get data from the keyboard, I'm going to go ahead and create some scanner objects. I'm just going to paste this code in. You can pause the video and watch it if you need to. I'm going to have one object that goes and gets my string variables and another for my ints, and I like to keep them separate. That's why I call this one OS scan and this one OI scan. Now you could have used the same variable for ints and the strings, but then you got to worry about flushing the buffer. And then I'm also going to have a variable to get the name and a variable to get the age, and then this is going to keep track of how many times I do a loop. I have a warning message here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to add the import for the scanner, as I'll show you up top. So now we have the import there so we can get data. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a variable that's going to contain my array list of my student objects. So I'll just type in the word array list, and I need to give it the data type in my less than greater than signs. So I'm going to say it's going to implement the student class. I'm going to call my variable AL student, and then I have to create the new array list object by calling a constructor. Now I also need to click on this little button here. It says go ahead and import the array list. Click on that. I'll show you up top that it brought in array list. So now my array list variable is ready to go. From here, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a loop that allows me to load up that array list. So I'm just going to type in a for loop, and I'll say as long as my count is less than, and I'm going to go ahead and just do 3 array list objects, and I'll use iCount as my counter variable, and then I'll say let's go ahead and enter a student name, and then we'll get that variable or get the data from the keyboard using our OS scan object, and we'll store that to the sname variable. And then let's go ahead and get the age for the student. And we'll also get that from the keyboard, and we'll store it to the iAge variable. And I'll use my OI scan next int method. So now this will load up the variables, but then I still have to go and load up the object in my array list. Now the way you do that is you specify your array list and you call the add method. The add method, though, is looking for a student object. The way that you create a student object is by calling new and the constructor. I could have come up right here and created a variable to hold the new student object, or better yet, rather than creating a brand new variable, I'll just say new, the student constructor, and then I'll pass the two variables I just got from the keyboard. This says create a brand new object and go ahead and store that variable into the array list by calling the add method. So this will load up 3 student objects in our array list. Now that I've loaded up all the data in our array list, let's go ahead and print them out. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of blank lines to clean up the output some. And then the way we sort this is we call the collections class. And now the collections class has a sort method. Now we don't have a collections object yet, but we don't need one, because we're actually just saying call the sort method from the collections class. And then it's looking for 2 parameters. The first parameter is your collection, which in our case is our array list variable called ALStudent. The second parameter we need to pass it is a comparator object. Now this object is the one that says this is how you're going to sort the data. So how do you do a comparator object? First thing you do is you type in new, and then you type in the word comparator, and you specify what type of collection you're working with. Well, we're working with the collection of student objects, and then you specify that you are calling the constructor for that comparator, and then you click on this little button here and says add the import for it. So we can look up here at the top, and that brings the comparator in. Now the thing that we still need to do on this comparator class right here is we need to specify what method are we using to do our comparing. So notice where I put my cursor right after the constructor parentheses, and I'm going to drop down over here, and I'm now going to specify the comparator method. I've moved my screen a little bit so I can show you a little bit better. So let's go ahead and type in that method now. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make it public, and we're going to say that this method returns an integer value, and the method that we use for comparing is called compare, and it receives 2 objects, and those objects are both going to be of type student. Now what happens when we use this object is that Java will automatically pass the data from our array list to this method, 2 objects at a time, and then keep comparing them. And then it returns a value, and the return value determines whether or not you have to flip this. Now we don't have to worry about it. We're just going to let the collection sort method handle it. That's the beauty of this. It's all encapsulated for us. So if I type that in, I'd say return, and we're working with integers, so we got to make sure that whatever returned is an integer, and we're going to compare the S1 age, and we're going to compare that to the S2 age. And so this now says we're going to use the collections class, the sort method, on the array list called ALStudent by using a brand new comparator object that has the method compare, using 2 objects at a time from this list, and Java would take care of passing those objects 2 at a time. We compare the S1 age compared to the S2 age, and if necessary, then it flips that internally and it sorts this. And I'm going to go ahead and put a little comma here, because this is an example of an ascending sort. Now if we wanted to be a descending sort, all you'd have to do is say compare 2 to 1. So in other words, you just flip how we'd want to do it. So this is an example of a descending sort, and maybe you'd want to say, well, let's sort it by the oldest student in the class, or maybe if this was an array list of basketball teams and the number was the number of wins, you could say let's sort it, and who's ever at top, they're the ones that have the most teams. Now the last thing to do after we sort that array is we just need to print it out. So I could drop down to here and say for I count, spelled correctly helps, 0, as long as iCount is less than the array list size. We'll do an iCount plus plus, and then within that we just want to print out the we just want to print out the student name and possibly the student size. So we could do something like this: student name is, and then we'll concatenate on the object. It'll be the object, which is AL student dot, and let's go ahead and we'll get the object from the array list, and then we'll specify what position of that array list, and then we'll do another dot, and let's print off the name, and then a plus sign, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this down to the next line by just pressing enter, and then we'll say the student name is this with the age of, and then we'll do the same thing, AL student dot get iCount, and then let's go ahead and retrieve the age. So I just sort of concatenated that. It's one big long line. So let me go ahead and save that, and let's run it, and let's see how it works. The student name is Mickey, 50 years old. Student name Donald, 20 years old. Student name Bugs, 25 years old, and then it prints it off in descending order. Mickey has an age of 50, Bugs has an age of 25, and Donald has an age of 20. Now remember, if you wanted that to be in descending order, all you'd have to do is change this to be S1 and change that to be S2. And that's how you can actually do an array list sort when the array list has array objects.